Associate Program Director at Bay State Medical Center's Emergency Department Residency. And I'm super excited to welcome you all to this virtual session talking about applying to EM this year and the current environment. As you saw, there was a little bit of a pop-up because we are recording this with a plan to distribute it later to people who weren't able to make it, just so you know. Please feel free to write anything in the chat at any time, any questions you might have. We'll try and address them either directly in the chat or during the group discussion. You can also, if you feel like you don't want everyone to see that you asked a question, you can direct them towards me and I will anonymously ask that question for you. So I guess without further ado, I'm going to introduce the other people that are on this panel from Bay State Medical Center's Emergency Department. And we'll start with Dr. Adam Kellogg, who is our program director at Bay State Emergency Medicine program. And he has been a mentor of many, many students around the application process. And prior to this, as associate program director, involved in CORD, the Council of Residency Directors, and EM. We also have Dr. Lisa Smith, who is currently an associate program director. And some of you on the chat also may know her because she is the director of our clerkship and has lots of experience in mentoring medical students through the application process. She also chaired ASCM, which you will hear quite a bit because so has Dr. Letfi Clayton, which is a student advising committee through CORD EM. And then Dr. Sian Letfi Clayton is our Director of Professional Development, also former Associate Program Director, and she also chaired ASCM from 2016 to 2017 and was on the Application Process Improvement Committee 2017 to 2019. And last but not least, we have Michael Boland, who is one of our program coordinators and sort of the touch point for anyone who is applying to Bay State Emergency Medicine to give us the program coordinator view of things. So with all that said, I will throw it to Dr. Lisa Smith to give us a little bit of an introduction of what we're going to talk about today, a little bit of the landscape. Again, feel free to put questions in the chat at any time.
Thanks, Ashley. You can hear me okay? Perfect. I figured we would start by highlighting some of the updates to the application process for this year. So kind of an overview of what I plan to talk about. Hang on, my slides are not advancing. There we go. Is what's different this year and specifically what you can do to take into account those differences to the application process. And then we will end with plenty of time for question and answer. And like Ashley said, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. She will moderate everything and is not afraid to interrupt me, even though I do speak very quickly. It can be done. So I want to start by saying that I think if we had done this kind of thing maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we would all have felt like we were standing on firm ground with some really solid evidence-based advising recommendations that we could impart to you. I will say that if we've learned anything from the pandemic is that everything is changing, and especially the landscape of student advising. So this is my a little bit too on the nose picture of changing landscape, but I really wanted to underscore how much a lot of what we're going to discuss tonight is sort of full of unknowns, and what we're trying to give you is sort of our best guess of how this is going to play out in the current application cycle and beyond. So the first thing to talk about is sort of how things have changed over the last few years. And so this is the most recent 3 years of NRMP data for the emergency medicine match. And if you just sort of take 10 seconds to look at this, there are a couple of trends that I think you'll probably notice, right? Number one is the number of programs has been increasing, and then the total applicants had been increasing until it dropped off precipitously last year. And kind of akin to that, the number of unfilled positions in emergency medicine had classically been vanishingly small, to the point that we would reliably tell applicants, you cannot plan to SOAP into an emergency medicine position. And then this past cycle, there was just 7.5% of those positions went unfilled. And it was just like hungry, hungry hippos is probably the only way that I can describe it. So I think thinking about this, if you were a program, what conclusions might you draw from this trend? And as an applicant, sort of what kinds of things are going through your mind? So I think question one is, where did all the students go, right? Why was there a 20% drop off in the number of applicants to emergency medicine? And so I think the first thing to talk about, I mean, COVID, right? COVID ruins all good things. And I think there was probably a lack of opportunity, right? A lot of students were protected, or with the goal of protecting them from this pathogen, right, deprived of the opportunity to see emergency medicine or to experience it in like a much altered way. And I think that that probably affected a lot of their decisions whether or not to pursue that specialty. I also think that for many of us, we were not at our best at a lot of the time that we have been dealing with COVID, and might not have been the best ambassadors for the specialty and able to impart all of the wonderful things and the reasons why we really do love what we do. And that may have had something to do with it as well. And in the background of all of this was the EM physician workforce projection study, which, there's plenty of medical studies that happen all the time that are truly wonderful and important, and you've heard of none of them, whereas this one made it into everybody's consciousness, right? And so this was a prediction that by the year 2030, there was going to be somewhere in the range of 9,000 plus overabundance of emergency physicians, right? And this was predicated on some initial conditions that we have here that you can sort of look at and decide whether you think they're valid in a pre-COVID world, and then sort of through the lens of the last 2.5 years, decide whether you think they're even close to reality. But for better or worse, the study came out and it definitely made it into the consciousness of the applicant pool, and it definitely made it into the consciousness of deans. And I think that there were applicants who may have been deciding between two specialties and either decided for themselves or advised away from emergency medicine. So I think that's the background of sort of where we're at in this, pool of uncertainty. And then on top of that, the advising community were like, and we're going to do some things differently this year. So amidst all of that, there's some changes that are being implemented this match cycle, which is what I wanted to focus on. So change number one, USMLE became pass-fail. So if you took the exam before January 26, 2022, you're going to have a quantitative score. But if you took it after, your score report is only going to say pass or fail. And so that's for USMLE and COMLEX transitions soon after. And so for this year, there will be a blend. We will have some applicants who have just pass-fail, some applicants that still have a quantitative USMLE. And so it's not quite clear how programs are going to adjust to that pass-fail only scenario. So this is a transition year. And so we're still speculating as to what they're going to use in the place of that old quantitative score. And so I think for you guys, what you can do in this transition year is recognizing that there's likely to be an increased emphasis on a step 2 CK. So if you have already taken step 2 CK and that score is going to be available when ERIS opens, that is the most important thing that you can do. So taking step 2 CK early has always been a recommendation for students who have maybe a lower than average or weaker step 1 score. And so I think it's going to start to become a recommendation for all applicants, because once step 1 becomes pass-fail, programs are likely to look for some sort of discriminator. And that step 2 CK quantitative score is likely to be that thing. So if you've already taken step 2 CK, that was a really wise decision, because I think that it's going to have an increasing emphasis when program directors are evaluating applications. Change number 2. There is a new format for eSLOs. So in an effort to reconcile the age-old disagreement regarding criterion reference versus normative referenced assessment in that SLO interpretation, which is not something that we need to go into now, but I think is fascinating, CORD created an updated eSLO version for this application cycle. So what's important for you to know is that this is specifically for the EM core rotation SLO format. It does not affect the other SLOs, right? The off-service SLO or O-SLO or the subspecialty SLO. This is specifically just the core EM rotation SLO. And it's a new format, but it's still the same critical importance. So the same emphasis that has always been on the letters of evaluation from the specialty will remain. It's just in a slightly different format with data in a slightly different way, but still super important and unfortunately still blinded to you. You still waive your right to see it. So what you can do, you can take a look at what this new format is. It's available on the CORD website. It's open access. You are welcome to review it. There aren't going to be any surprises here, but it will at least remind you of all of the skills and behaviors that you're being assessed on during those away rotations. And those EM rotations are reliably one of the most important aspects of your application that program directors care about. So continuing to do awesome on those rotations is still as important as always, and recognizing that that evaluation is just going to have a little bit of a tinkered format for this year. And change number 3, preference signaling or program signaling, which I think we often use as interchangeable wording. So as you know, EM is participating in a 1-year pilot of program signaling, along with 16 other specialties using the ERIS supplemental application. And so very briefly, this is the labor economics concept where you have a pool of applicants applying to a pool of jobs in the same area, and it allows those applicants to assign virtual tokens to particular employers they are enthusiastic about, especially. And so that allows the employers to focus their in-depth application review on candidates who are likely to be high yield prospects. So it increases transparency and visibility for the applicants. It is a voluntary process. And so the same way you guys get to choose whether or not to participate, programs also got the opportunity to opt in or not. Of the 273 EM programs registered through ERIS, 261 are participating. So that's a 95.6% program participation rate, which is pretty bonkers. Programs are really into this. And just sort of like as an aside, I am also very enthusiastic about the potential of program signaling, both to increase transparency and also to improve the application experience for applicants and programs alike. I think that this is a great step in the right direction. So what you can do, so to maximize the benefit from program signaling, you really need to do some research earlier in the process than has been expected before. So spending time getting to know programs is really to your advantage. So interfaces like Emra Match, Texas Star, the double AMC, Residency Navigator, these are all really helpful tools to screen programs. And for programs that you think you might be really interested in, there's going to be other ways for you to get to learn more, right? So there's program websites, there's social media presence, delving more deeply into ones that you think you might be a good fit for. So a lot of programs, once you start to look at many of them, you'll start to get some of the subtle ways in which they're varied and pick up on some of the training aspects that you might be excited about, or maybe some that you are possibly less enthusiastic about experiencing, but identifying programs that seem like a good fit for you as far as your training priorities, but also your overall competitiveness. Because doing a little bit of work up front will allow you to maximize getting your tokens to the right places. The other thing that's going to be important for you is recognizing that even though the ERIS applications aren't released to programs until the 28th of September, the deadline for program signals is actually the 16th. And so you want to make sure that you've got those in time, because the deadline is 2 weeks earlier than you might think it is. So your program token need to be finalized by the 16th, or whatever you have entered in the system by 11:59 and 59 seconds on the 16th will become your final options. And so make sure that you've got something in there, commit to it, or recognizing that you will be passively committed to it. And the 16th is that deadline. So in summary, uncertainty is the new normal. This is the first year where we're going to have that blend of quantitative and step 1 pass-fail scores, and programs are still figuring out how they're going to respond, but likely there will be an increased emphasis on step 2 CK. So having that score available is a really smart idea. There's a new eSLO, and clinical performance has always been critical. And so with that new format, it's going to carry the same weight, but just be a little bit tinkered from years past. And preference signaling is going to force you to do a little bit of extra research up front, but hopefully with a big payout when it comes to interview invitations in October. So that was a whirlwind of what's new and different. I'm going to stop my share, and hopefully we can open it up for questions and discussion.
That was fabulous, Lisa. Thank you so much for going through that. Now, I do want to make sure that we're able to answer questions, and really the upcoming time is yours to ask any questions that you may have. I also really dislike putting people on the spot. So I'm going to give you a minute to think about if there are specific questions you have. Again, you can send me a direct message, or you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute and ask us questions. But I did want to ask this team, because I think a pretty common question that comes up is, what are the average number of applications that students should be submitting this match year to successfully match?
If you'd asked a couple of years ago, like, I think we would know, which is like somewhere in the 30 to maybe 45 or 50 range, depending on sort of someone's application. But I think in general, the perception is we don't really know yet how many people are going to apply, but the idea, it seems like there's less people who are going to be in your applicant pool than there have been in years past. And so the competition for interviews is going to be less. And so you probably don't need as many applications. Certainly, if anyone is giving you the old advice, the old standard dean advice of 80 applications as like a starting point, that is terrible advice for basically everybody. I don't care how concerned you are about your application, 80 is not the solution. The solution is going to be to do a little bit of homework and find places that fit you and match up with you. I'm curious what, like Lisa, what are you telling people now? Because I'm still sticking with somewhere in that 30 to 40 range, kind of as the top.
I still am a firm believer in 30 to 40 of the right programs is better than 80 of the wrong ones. And so I think with good advising, the right answer is in that 30 to 45 range. And I would say that I'm pretty confident advising pretty much everybody with a solid plan in that range, recognizing that I understand all of the drivers and the motivations to the over application, and that my hope is that with consistently evidence-based advising and program signaling as an important tool going forward, we'll be able to nudge those numbers down in a way where people feel confident going into this process and empowered that they are making wise choices and not just sort of feeling like they're surrendering to panic.
Yeah, I think the big thing to realize is it's probably better than it's been for EM applicants in a long time. And you want to apply smarter, not harder. So it doesn't have to be a massive number, but like you're hearing over and over again, it is going to take a little legwork on your part to find the programs that actually match with your learning style and with your needs.
I would just reinforce that, like with the preference signaling, it's more important than ever and more worthwhile than ever to do a little bit of homework. I think if I was applying 3 years ago and you told me, I had a dean telling me it's 80 programs, other people telling me 60 programs, I would not do that much homework. I'm like, I'll figure it out later. I'm just going to click on the first 80 alphabetically and just call it a day. And I suspect there were folks that did that because it's just so overwhelming how much to look at. But if you're trying to narrow down to a smaller pool, because these signals are going to be really valuable. We think that most program directors, because we've had internal conversations, we've surveyed people, we're pretty sure that most people, it's going to move them. It's going to increase your chances of significantly increase your chances of getting an interview there. So sending those to the right place is going to make all the difference. And that right place isn't the biggest name you can find. It's the place that's right for you, that has the things that you're looking for.
I'm Jordan. I'm one of the students up here. Hi. I'm actually really happy to hear that because I'm an international student. So our school always tells us to overshoot, and embarrassingly enough, they tell us to apply to like 150 programs, which to me, that's ridiculous because doing the math, that's like about $4,000 for applications. But looking at programs and everything, I just kind of find that to be a little ridiculous. So it's nice to hear that.
Yeah,
and definitely, yeah.
I was just going to say, and hopefully that on Emmer Match, you can select programs that preferentially do take international med grads. You can also look at programs and look at how many grads they have and how many current residents they have. It's a great way to start to look at like whether programs are going to be more or less receptive to your application. And that's a much better way of like narrowing down to programs than it is to just be like, I'm going to flood them and somebody's going to do it.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so I do want to quickly, before we answer some of these excellent questions, reinforce Looking on Emera Match will give you some of that data. I'm somebody who went to med school in a place and a time when there was not a lot of evidence-based guidance. So I see what Lisa's doing, and it's like, oh, I would have loved to have that. I really just sort of tossed away a bunch of money applying places where either I didn't have a shot or I wasn't going to be happy. And it's hard to know if you don't have an advisor at your home school. So I will say Emera Match is a great place to start. There's some resources at the top of the chat that Adam put together on how to see what it is a good match. And of course, if you have questions, you'll have our information in an email that goes out after this. Get in touch with us. We all really liked where we went to residency, partially because most of us went to Bay State, but we really like it and we want you to match somewhere where you really enjoy it as well. We're not looking for it to be a painful process for anybody, so we'll help however we can. So I'm going to throw out a couple questions for our panelists that were asked in the chat, and feel free to just jump in and answer whatever you can. So Bridget asked if there's any difference between submitting in ERIS the day it opens versus sometime before September 28th.
I'll jump on that one. So the data gets released to programs all at once. So they don't know when you've submitted. We just know what is available when it's opened. The ERIS program reliably goes down on the day that everything is due because of all of that traffic. So I think it is only to your benefit if you've got it all done to submit ahead of time so that you are confident your stuff is in and you're not panicking because you've got like that little hourglass of doom or the Windows or the Mac little rainbow circle. So your stuff is done, right? So the stuff that you have control over, like your CV, right? You know all of that information, just answer all those questions, get it done and get it in. Your personal statement, all of that. You know, people can still update your application so your letters can come in later, stuff can still happen. Even if, you know, you don't have all of your letters in, you can still submit your part. And I think it's a really good idea for you to do that.
You're not hurting yourself by like the temptation sometimes is to wait until everything is in and then submit all together. So then your last letter's trickling in, it's October 15th. That would actually really hurt you, because if I see that I've got hundreds of people who applied on September 28th, regardless of when they clicked send, but it says September 28th. And then I get a few people trickling in on October 15th or on November 1st. I'm assuming that's not somebody who was actually interested in our program and just got panicked and just sort of, you know, decided to, you know, like max out one more credit card and send a whole bunch more applications. And that, you know, they're probably also then going to get a bunch of interviews in a little while, even though they're panicked now. And in the end, they're not really going to be interested in coming to us. And so those aren't applications we're going to take nearly as seriously, you know, unless if that happens to you and it is sort of an error, you know, you can reach out to people and let them know that there is genuine interest, but that's what people are going to assume. So there's no upside in waiting. Have your stuff in, everything that's in your control, just like Lisa said, by September 28th.
And for the next question, what do you think about a third letter, like an OSLO or a subspecialty SLO, once you have your 2 eSLOs? Is that helpful or harmful?
And I can jump on that as well. So the 2 SLO limit is specifically for those academic residency-based SLO letters. So all of the other ones, so the non-residency based SLOs, the off-service SLOs, the subspecialty SLOs, those don't fall into that mathematical calculation. So those 2 SLOs are specifically from your core EM rotation. So home and away, 2 aways if you don't have a home program available to you. And that third letter can be any of those other SLO formats or a completely other letter, right? A narrative letter from an off-service rotation, a narrative letter from an advisor or somebody that you did a capstone project with, something totally unrelated to your clinical portfolio. It is by far your less important letter, but it has to be there, right? You have to have 3 letters. And so your 2 SLOs plus something else, whether it's a different form of SLO or a non-SLO letter altogether, totally fine. And it is going to matter the least of all 3.
Excellent. Is there anyone who has an additional question they want to unmute before I ask some questions?
I have another question.
Go ahead.
So I know some programs are really big on students doing research or some type of publication, but for some of us who haven't really gotten involved in that, but are more involved in like national programs and like being part of committees such as like AAEM or ASEP, does that kind of count along the same lines? Like, is Bay State big on one versus the other?
And that's a great question because each program sort of has the things that they're into. Some places are very like service oriented, or especially like service leadership, just as an example, and probably something that catches our eye a little bit more than research. Though we want future researchers at Bay State, the best way to get future researchers at Bay State is to train them as residents and then never let them leave. So we are not against bringing in researchers, but we also know that that's not sort of the biggest strength we have, and that in our geographic area are a bunch of institutions that have huge research programs going on. And so we're not looking to outcompete Harvard, and the other Harvard that they call Yale on research. But we certainly do some here. There's opportunities here, but what attracts our attention is going to be the things that we sort of do well. And you can look at sort of what those programs do and be able to tell that. You see a program that's going to make you do research during their, like they explicitly say you're going to do research during training. They really value research. They're going to take that really seriously. Programs that talk a lot about leadership and sort of national involvement, they're going to be taking things like national involvement really seriously, because it's a lot easier to have somebody support them in continuing to do that than take someone who's never served on a committee, never done anything like that or held a position, and then make them do that. People don't generally like that. And so we usually kind of give it away by what things we advertise as the strengths of our program.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question as well. Kind of along with like the submission of the application. If we get our letters coming in later after our US application's been submitted, or like our step 2 CK score later, are we expected to reach back out to the programs and let them know something new's been added to our application?
You don't need to reach back out to programs. What I'll say is when we review applications and some of the data we would like to use to make that decision for interview is not there, we usually will sort of put it in a holding pattern pile, where we wait and we check back a little bit later to see if that score is in or that additional letter is in. And I think that's how many programs will do it when you don't have something in right on September 28th. If you find that you're not getting interviews, especially from the programs you were most interested in, and you have something new like a letter or your score comes in, you may want to consider messaging just like those core programs that you're most interested in. Not all of them, not a ton of them, but just a couple that you're like, I really want this program to know that that's there. That's totally reasonable. You just don't want to overwhelm with that message.
Perfect, thank you.
And then there's a question in the chat about program signaling strategy. And maybe, it'd be great if you all could expand. I know Lisa said that she was a big fan of preference signaling, maybe explaining why you feel like it's so beneficial. But the question was around hearing that you shouldn't preference signal at your home institution or the one where you did a rotation, because it's assumed that you're interested in them. And so you should save those preference signals for elsewhere. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is sort of the one piece of hard and fast guidance when it comes to program signaling. And this is sort of a constant. If you look at any of the EM specific guidance, the specific guidance from AAMC. So this is everywhere, because the idea is you want to use your program signals at places where you've got a chance, but it's not a sure thing. And so at places where you've done a rotation, so either your home program or places where you did an away rotation, they know you. They're going to look at your application. Whether or not you send them a signal is not going to be the decision maker for them. And so don't use that token at those places, because that's already a sure thing. On the other side of that coin is you don't want to use a token at a place that is so unlikely that it's going to be kind of like throwing it away. So for example, if you are an osteopathic student with lower board scores and there is an uber competitive program that hasn't matched an osteopathic student in the 4 years of residency pictures that you've reviewed on their website, and they say they've got a board score cutoff and it's higher than your scores, whether or not you signal them is not going to be the thing that makes the difference. And so don't use your token there. So what you want to try to do is target those places that are a good fit for you, that you are worried you might not otherwise be able to communicate those ties, right? So maybe your significant other's family lives geographically close to a program, but if you just look at your own application, you didn't grow up there, you're not from there, you didn't go to school there, that program might not necessarily understand that you've got a compelling tie to that program. Being able to send them a signal token will catch their interest. The other things to keep in mind, and this is from looking at the data from ENT, is that while in the 2 years that ENT has done this, most programs got some signals. About 25% of the ENT programs got about 50% of the signals. And so you can imagine that the more signals a program gets, the less weight each one of those has. And so you also want to try to target programs that are not necessarily going to be the ones that you anticipate are going to get 100 signals, right? Because what a program is going to do with 10 signaling applicants is going to be different than what a program with 100 signaling applicants does with that piece of information. So you want to use the guiding principle of you want to signal places that you would be genuinely interested in interviewing, but you also want to keep in mind that you want to aim for the middle of the road, right? Not the sure thing and not the impossible reach, and sort of thread that needle.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I think it's worth reminding yourself as an applicant that programs, just like you're trying to figure out, you have X number of applications and you want to maximize how successful those can be. Programs have a set number of interview spots, right? Even though everyone would love to interview everyone, they can't. And so programs are trying to interview people who they like and think will be successful, who will fit well there, and who are probably going to rank them in a reasonable spot, right? You want to get somebody who will rank you highly and not sort of toss away an interview spot on someone who is very unlikely to rank you or choose to match with you. All right, we have lots more questions. It's awesome. So this question is about strengthening your application after you're done with your 2 slows. What are some ways you can strengthen your application? But also, and I think a really important question, what's an appropriate way to keep in touch with programs that you like? And this is actually a question I had already planned on kind of throwing to Adam, which is how much communication is helpful and how much communication is harmful?
So I would love to give you the one like golden rule of communication, but unfortunately the reality is that there's a huge variation from program director to program director. Some really appreciate sort of that ongoing communication, don't mind answering questions back and forth. And there are others who get really frustrated with it because they get inundated with so many questions that they feel like they can't, so many people trying to make an impression that they feel like they can't get through like their day-to-day job. They can't get through their email inbox because they have so many people reaching out to them. I will say you can kind of guess how that's distributed. The more attention you get, like those programs that are going to get, you know, let's say, I don't know, 2,000 signals from the 2,500 applicants, those programs also get a ton of emails of people saying, trying to, you know, remind them about, you know, the new board score that was uploaded, trying to get those people, getting those programs' attention. Those programs tend to want a lot less communication. Programs that you would imagine are at sort of the other end of the competitiveness spectrum. And when I say competitive, all I mean is how many people apply to them. If you are a program out of 2,500 applicants, you get 2,000 of them apply to your program, you are very competitive. And if out of 2,500 applicants, you only get 200 or 300, you're at the other end of the spectrum. The competition for your interview slots is a lot less. And under those circumstances, contact is going to mean a lot more. Program preference signals are going to mean a lot more. So there's not kind of one right answer to it, but, you know, polite communication by email. There's definitely some things you can do wrong, like calling them on their home phone number, you know, driving to their house and sitting outside. Michael, can you think of any other things that maybe with communication, Michael's our program administrator, that can go wrong with that sort of communication?
I think just always being really respectful with your communication and not being too pushy, and just know that, you know, you will get a response. Maybe if you don't get one in a few days, you can try again, but, you know, and that's what people like me are there for. If you're not getting a response from the program director, then email the program coordinator and they can kind of gauge whether or not, you know, they need to reach out to the PD and see if this is something, because we keep track of all that. We keep track of every communication you send us, so we know.
Excellent. And then there's a question around virtual interviewing, and I think it's a great question. So now that our interviews are all virtual, how should applicants get to know a program, what's available? And specifically, there was a question about how Bay State is handling second looks.
For the second look one, it's a great question. This is something we are still discussing, whether it's going to be, we're going to do our own as emergency medicine. The hospital is having some discussions about doing their like hospital-wide second look days to sort of let people get to know the area and sort of hosting events like that, versus us doing sort of smaller ones. Our plan is to do something. We've done a virtual second look the last 2 years. We want to do live second looks for folks who want to do it. But the most important piece about this is that they're going to happen after we put our rank list in. What we don't want to do is we don't want to do mandatory second looks. We want to make this as reasonable a process. We do all this, like, you know, we're trying to embrace the virtual interviews from an equity standpoint, not put this huge financial burden on people. And instead now you have to come out for like the second look day in February. And that's not what we're going to do. We're going to submit our rank list, and our second look opportunities will be after we have finished our rank list. So it really is just for you. It is not a time to come and sort of show off. It's for you to come in and find out if this is a place you'd want to live, if these are people you'd want to hang out with, if these are the bathrooms you want to use, get to know the place really well.
And in addition to checking out the websites that different residencies have, one of the things that, you know, as you get down and you interview and you have those few programs that just really touched you and you really think you would be a fit, if you have the ability to come live, even if there isn't a second look, and actually go and eat in some of the restaurants and hang out in the spots of that city and see what activities you would enjoy, I think that can be a really good way to get to know the spot. Obviously, that is a burden of cost on you. And so sort of think about really like, what were the programs that touched you when you interview and you felt like you had a genuine connection and where you would fit best. And that's where, if you have those dollars that you can spend, that's the spots I would go to.
It's hard to getting to know a program was always hard, even when you were interviewing in person and it was just for, you know, half a day. But certainly it's difficult to do virtually. Luckily for you all, programs have been doing it for a little while, so there should be more information online. Certainly when in-person interviewing started and had to happen, I think there was a lot less and people scrambled to get things up on their website and virtual tours and that sort of thing. But now I would say most programs have virtual tours, have information where you can see what are they emphasizing, what's important to that program. And sometimes you can join resident conference and get an idea of how people are interacting if that resident conference is broadcast virtually, even if it's in person. So those are some scenarios where you may be able to get to know a program as well.
The other things that are helpful is a lot of programs, sort of as this has matured, have put together like fun videos to help you get to know the area better. You know, we've got a couple on our website, just kind of let you get a better feel for what the place is like. And then there's no rule that you can't travel. Like, you're absolutely allowed to travel, especially if you do it sort of conveniently. Like if you're not from the Northeast, for example, the last couple of years, we've seen people, they may not be able to come into the hospital because we're not allowed to have anybody come in on tour. We're not allowed to sort of do like, you know, fake mini interviews that are sort of under the, you know, that are, you know, like undercover. But there's nothing to stop you from checking out the region, checking out the area, seeing what things are like, seeing what the rental situation is like, seeing what cost of living is like, seeing if it sort of seems like a fun, nice area to live in. And so especially in a place like the Northeast, everything's close together, a lot of people would take like a week-long tour at some point and just go to a whole bunch of different areas and just check them out just to get a better sense of it if they were looking to move to an unfamiliar area. And you don't have to time that with the programs.
And one thing that worked really well in the last couple of years for me is applicants would ask me questions and I would try to connect them with a specific resident that maybe had similar situations or maybe couples matching or specific questions about things that maybe one of our residents would be able to better relate to. So, email the coordinator, ask them questions like that and see if they can connect you with one of the residents that maybe could help you out a lot with some of your questions.
So Michael, I'll sort of keep you, I guess, on the line if that's okay, and just ask if you can reiterate or think of some behaviors that are important to you as a program coordinator, because I think it is clear that the program coordinators are extremely important in helping make the decision and be that point of contact, and you're certainly pivotal in our role of choosing a residency class. So what have you seen people do, important behaviors that have helped them or hindered their application?
We talked a lot about communication, and a program's not going to know you're interested unless you tell us. And I think that's really important, but also making sure to share the right information. And I've been doing this for about 18 years. And several years ago, we had a couple applicants not tell us they were couple matching because they were a same-sex couple and they were concerned about that. And so we didn't match the two of them. We only matched one of them. So little things like that, don't be afraid to share information. Reach out. I try to take a lot of pride in answering emails as quickly as possible. Adam told me today that I'm doing pretty well at that, so that's good. But even if I don't have an answer for you right away, I will at least tell you I'm looking into it. But we expect the same in return. If we email and ask you a question, or some information, try to get back within a reasonable time, or at least respond. The coordinators. One thing that I'm very impressed with at our program, and I think they do that at all programs, is, during the debriefs after recruitment day, they ask us, did you have any interaction that wasn't great with that applicant? And we're going to tell them. So just knowing to be professional and respectful to everyone you deal with. Back in the days when we did in person, I had a applicant hit on my co-coordinator. That didn't really go over all that well, and that person didn't move any farther. Unfortunately, that was an inappropriate thing to do, but otherwise I've never had anything too drastic. I think the biggest things is when you're on Zoom, don't look uninterested, and because that comes out, and when you're emailing the coordinator, be respectful and be professional, and know that we all talk, just like you all have your Reddits and your Discord servers and everything else. All coordinators talk. We have our own listservs, we have our own things. So know that if you did something that you shouldn't have done at one program, I'll probably hear about it. So just forewarn you that that's out there. But again, if you don't hear back from the coordinator in a couple days, don't be afraid to email them again and ask them a question or anything. And that's fine, because we are going to get pretty busy for a while. I'm trying to look at some of my notes here to think of other things like I can't stress enough. I've done a talk for other coordinators on professionalism, because sometimes we cannot always be the most professional people. I am never like that, but others can be. But it goes the same for everybody you work with. Trust, you're going to be doing this all your life. You're going to need to be respectful with your nurses and in your environmental services. Be respectful with the coordinator, and you will get great return, I can assure you. So I think that's really all I have for now. But don't ever be afraid to email me or any of the coordinators. We will respond, and we want to hear from you. We want to know those questions, and we can connect you. I think you might get quicker responses from us than you might from some of the faculty, just because they've got a lot of other things going on, and we can connect you to the right person. We want to make sure you talk to the right person.
Thank you, Michael. We are getting towards the end of our time. So I want to make sure that we leave time for any questions. Is there anyone who has an additional question they want to unmute and ask?
Ashley, can I add one more thing that I forgot?
Of course you can.
I'm sorry. We use Thalamus for our invitations, and a lot of programs use different things, Interview Broker, Eris, whatever. But please make sure you check your spam folder, because things will go to your spam and you're not going to realize it. And then I've gotten the excuse, oh, I didn't realize it went to my spam. Well, shame on you. You should have checked your spam. So I'm just warning you now, make sure you check your spam, especially when interviews start and invitations start coming out. You never know what might screw something up in an email. So keep an eye on your spam and make sure you're getting everything. I don't want you to miss something. That's what it's the biggest fear.
It's become a pretty common practice among a lot of applicants to have a specific email that they use for this process that they have control over. If you're really good with your email and sort of know how to adjust your spam filters and all that sort of stuff, that's great. Or if you just create a fresh one that no one has access to. So I'll see ones, it'll be like advising, it'll be Ashley Deutsch application at gmail.com, and sort of creates that just for this purpose, because it's not going to get a lot of other email because it hasn't been discovered yet, because she hasn't gone trolling around the internet on it yet. But she just gives it out for this. And so the spam filter is entirely shut off. You have it feed into your inbox, and you know that you're getting everything, because there's nothing worse than to find out that you missed the window to sign up for an interview because it was in your spam folder.
This whole application process is a little bit of a weird matchmaking system. And so I just want to reiterate, and we'll answer these last couple questions. In sort of a summary for this application cycle, right? You're going to do the research, you're going to use things like Emera Match, you're going to make sure that you would like a program that you're applying to, that you're a good fit, that you're what they're looking for as well. And then you're going to target your applications and be strategic with your tokens. And if you need help, you can always reach out to us. So a few additional questions. It asked if do we have any virtual open house lined up later about our program. Man, it's like you're setting me up for the next thing that I was going to say, which is an excellent question. So on Monday at 7 o'clock, we have a Meet the Chiefs /Y Bay State. So it's going to be all residents. The Chiefs are going to come and talk a little bit about themselves and how they came to Bay State and their experience as some of our third years, and then we'll have other residents, interns, and second years about why they chose Bay State, if they feel like that's a good decision for them. It'll be much more Bay State specific than this talk, which is supposed to be just generally about applying, that we love talking about Bay State, and we'll do it all day. Dedicated email used for forwarding to our pagers was a clutch tip that I got. Oh, interesting. All right. Well, there you go. I couldn't set that up at all. But yes, the dedicated email sounds like a great idea. And then if it can somehow notify you, because some things are time specific, it makes sense.
Can I make one comment just because this does come up? If you are not getting any interview offers and everyone around you is getting interview offers, this is a great time to look over your ERAS application and make sure you didn't not click the right buttons to actually have everything submitted. If nothing is coming back, that is often a sign that something is wrong in the process. You're not going to just get 0. So you go look at it and then have a friend double check it with you that everything's put in right. This has happened to a few people every year and it always feels horrible. So if that's happening to you, there's probably something wrong in the tick boxes.
And reach out to one of the programs you rotated at, because you have that ongoing advisor relationship. Have them pull you up on ERAS and see what's missing. The most common one is not releasing your step scores. That's been your transcript from a USMLE. That's the one I've seen go wrong. That's really impacted people, because it looks like you just haven't uploaded it yet. And you have to, there's a little extra clicky box you have to do to say that, yes, I want to share these with everybody. And so double checking that, that's a great tip.
All right, any final thoughts from our panelists?
You know, I was going to say something. We look forward to getting to know you during the interview process, during this sort of whole ongoing application recruitment cycle. Please come, check out our website, come meet some of our residents, reach out to us. We're happy to connect you with people as well, to help you talk to, because we may not have the answers you want. We'll help you talk to the folks who do. This is a great time to be going into emergency medicine. I know Lisa showed some really scary numbers, but the ED is as busy as it's ever been, and probably busier. All things are pointing towards there is a huge number of demand and need for emergency physicians. There may be a reckoning coming one day in the future, decades from now, where there will be an oversupply. But right now, there is a deficit of people to do the job, and all the stuff from that workforce report is gone and probably won't affect anybody who's on the Zoom calls career in any meaningful way. It's a great time to be going into it, and as a student, it's a great time to get emergency medicine essentially on sale, because the demand for you to come for interviews has never going to have been higher. So it's kind of like buying the dip in the stock market. You guys are buying the dip, because when anesthesia did this to themselves 20, 25 years ago, they published a jobs report. They said CRNAs are going to take all the work. There's not going to be room for emergency physicians anymore. They cratered their match. They had the same thing. A lot less people applied to them. There was some shrinking of programs. A few programs closed that sort of right-sized the specialty, and it took them a long time to regain popularity, and really got back to, it was last year when emergency medicine did it to themselves, that anesthesia got back to the popularity they had 25 years ago. Funny how that worked out. But right now, where it's going to be a few years before this sort of turns back around and sort of the public perception. So it's a great time to be doing it. And so I say this in every year, treat this like a consumer. Find programs that appeal to you, that have things that you want, that are the kind of places you want to train. Don't just try and target this based on who you think you can convince to take you. Look at the places, approach this trying to find the best possible fit for you, where you're going to be the happiest. And it usually works out really well, because as a program, that's what we're looking for. We're trying to find people who we think are going to be happy here, living here, training here, joining this group. All right, that was enough for me. Other thoughts from other folks?
I'll just make one plug. Adam put these in at the top of the chat as we started. But there's really great evidence-based resources that everyone here has helped to create. And they not only go over the application process in general, but they also go over a whole bunch of different groups within the applications, where you want to do slightly different applications, IMG, couples, military, everything's in there. So it's a great place to start. If you're saying, hey, am I doing the right stuff? Go right there. And then, as we've said a couple times, we are all very, very happy. We love advising people. Please feel free to reach out to us anytime.
So I'll close it out by saying that I agree with Adam about emergency medicine, but I would add that our jobs are the coolest. So congratulations on choosing the absolute coolest job to do. And I'm sure you'll all do wonderfully. The fact that you came at 7 o'clock at night on one of your, I'm assuming, days off, because it doesn't look like you all are working, to come and hear about applying means that you will likely do extremely well, and hopefully really enjoy the field, because it's an awesome job. So please reach out to us if you guys have any questions. You'll be getting a follow-up email with our contact info, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What'd you guys think?
Now we're
Are we
alone.
recording? Let's stop recording.
Exactly. Stop recording.